And all the hullabaloo about the Oilers getting to the second round of the playoffs, kind of forgot to mention Leon Draisaitl is going to win the Hart Trophy. At least he would if it were up to me. On today's edition of Locked On Oilers.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this bonus edition of Locked On Oilers. I am your host, Nick Zararis. I've been the host of Locked On Oilers for a full season now. This is my third season with the Locked On Podcast Network, and I am so grateful to be here. So grateful the Oilers are on to the second round. And I want to thank everyone that's making Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Locked On Oilers, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's show is brought to you by the Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K device, where you can turn any TV into an Xbox. No console needed. Head on over to amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to learn more. So I owe Leon an episode. I was very caught up in winning game 6, getting to the second round, and for all of the praises I've sung, all of the work he has put in, he deserves me to talk about how good he is for 30 minutes on Locked On Oilers. So we're going to start our show kind of talking about how the narratives unfold, about how MVP gets voted on, and why narratives are such an essential component of building the case. The second segment, we're going to hit on why Leon deserves it. We're going to look at the stats with and without Connor McDavid. We'll talk about McDavid's numbers away from Leon. And then in our final segment, I will make the cases for Connor Hellebuyck and Nikita Kucherov, but I will give you a straightforward reason why I think Draisaitl's case is stronger. And if you're watching over on YouTube and you're wondering if I'm crying while I'm talking, no, my allergies have just had me in a blender the last few weeks as the seasons are changing. It went from like 40 degrees to 80 degrees in the span of a week and a half. So pollen definitely playing a bit of hell with my system, but no, I am not crying at how good Leon is at hockey, though I would if that was what it took. So the NHL MVP, the NBA MVP, whenever we're talking about an MVP award, it is really important to remember who votes on the award. These are people who are in the media, and there are different classifications of people within the media. And I think Leon's narrative is the strongest for as to why he deserves it, and we're going to get there in a second. But just remember, we are talking about media heads, whether those are national, beat, and you think about the mechanics of those jobs, how it lends to watching certain teams, more teams than others, and depending where you're based, depending on your primary responsibility, you might not be able to watch as much hockey as you probably should if you are going to be the one that decides on MVP. But as for Leon and why his narrative is the strongest, number one, this is one of the best players of the last 10 years. When we're talking about this time period of NHL history from 2015 to 2025, even if you want to stretch it a little further back, you want to go back to the half lockout season, 2012-13 season, that was only 40-something games. Draisaitl is undoubtedly one of the best players of this window. He's third in goals behind Austin Matthews and Alex Ovechkin. Ever heard of him? And he's third in points behind Nikita Kucherov, who's also nominated for the Hart Trophy, Connor McDavid, his teammate. And a lot of Draisaitl's early career, and I would say through his first Hart Trophy that he won in that 2019-2020 season, there was a lot of conjecture that Leon was the beneficiary in a more lopsided relationship, that he was the player benefiting from getting to play so many minutes with Connor McDavid. And over the course of, I would say, the last 3 years or so, you have begun to see that narrative kind of change. And I think, frankly, I would say now that Leon and Connor is a two-way street. It is a mutually beneficial relationship where both of them are actively making the other one better. And this year in particular, I think you can make an argument that Leon was making Connor better. And look, McDavid didn't have a bad season. I did an episode a few weeks ago dispelling the notion that he was having a down year when he was still top 6 or 7 in points, and he missed 13 games, a couple injuries, a suspension, and he was still top 10 in points and was still over a point per game. And that's a down year or a bad year. And look, expectations, I get it. He's the best player in the world. People expect him to push 120, 130 points every season, but we got to talk about the context. You got to talk about the problems the Oilers had this year. And that's really what makes Leon's case for me. When you talk about Leon playing the majority of his minutes this year with Vasily Podkolzin and Victor Arvidsson. Now, Podkolzin's not a player who just had a lot of NHL experience coming into this year. Somebody who, frankly, was underutilized in his 2.5 seasons with the Canucks. I mean, coming into this year, Vasily Podkolzin had 137 career NHL games. He played all 82 regular season games this year. He's already almost halfway to his career games total prior to this year. That should tell you this is an underutilized player. We're talking about somebody who last year averaged less than 11 minutes per game on a good Canucks team last year. So with that in mind, and then you talk about the other end of the spectrum, you talk about Arvidsson, where the fit was a bit questionable right out of the gate. The chemistry did not manifest, dealt with injuries on and off throughout the course of the season. And what did Leon do? He led the league in goals. And until he got injured, he was right there with Nikita Kucherov and Nathan McKinnon as far as the Art Ross for most points in the league. So I think you can make a strong case just right there that Leon had a transformational season, that he took more responsibility than he has in years past by carrying lower caliber line mates, didn't have the benefit of playing with a 20-goal guy like Evander Kane like he did last year, didn't get to ride with Nugent-Hopkins or get to ride with Zach Hyman. And he and McDavid definitely played a bit more this year together in the regular season than they did last year. Absolutely more in the playoffs, at least in the early stages, than they did last year. But I think when you add that up, when you talk about increased offensive output, 52 goals is not his career high, but it's up there. It's a great season. He led the league in goals. While doing that, playing with lower caliber line mates, getting slightly more minutes. We're talking about 1%, less than 1% more minutes of his ice time against quality competition as opposed to bottom six guys. And you talk about a little bit better defense as well. And look, I don't think penalty minutes are a great barometer for how effective a player is defensively. But Draisaitl having his penalty minutes is absolutely part of the story of him being a better player this year. Draisaitl definitely a player who is known to be a bit temperamental, somebody who plays with emotions, which is a good thing. You know, we talk about these great players and what makes them so great, and there's an innateness to it. And some guys are really reliant on that feeling, that energy to carry them. And sometimes you got to cross-check a guy. And look, that is not to justify taking stupid penalties. I definitely think the Oilers took quite a few too many of those in the Kings series. But when you have your penalty minutes, you score, you lead the league in goals, you are close to the Art Ross as long as you are healthy. You are the second best or the best player on your team, on a team that's not great. And I don't want to get ahead of myself and spoil my arguments against Hellebuyck and Kucherov, but I think when you talk about it purely from a value perspective, Draisaitl led the league in goals playing with two wingers who are not that dynamic. You know, Podkolzin was a fourth liner before this year. We are talking about Victor Arvidsson, who's coming off of a major back injury. He only played 15 regular season games last year, and the fit was not seamless. And it didn't really matter to Leon. And yes, there will be some derisive people who say something along the lines of, he's a power play merchant. Yeah, he scored 16 of his 52 on the power play. Is that insane? No, that's not half. That's not 3/4. It's not like Chris Kreider's 54 goal season a couple years ago. That was very obviously the beneficiary of some crazy shooting luck in a hot power play. Leon was the most valuable player in the NHL this year on narrative. And now we're going to pivot coming up next to why the stats say Draisaitl was the most valuable player in the NHL. Be sure to stick around to this edition of Locked On Oilers, where we've got your team covered every day. Did you know your Fire TV can also double as an Xbox? You can turn any TV into a gaming and entertainment hub with a Fire TV Stick 4K device. No console required. Grab a paired controller, subscribe, or sign in to an Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included account, and you're ready to go, you can dive into hundreds of titles like EA Sports College Football 25, otherwise known as my most played game of 2024. I'm itching to get back on the trail. When I'm done with this episode, we're going to go back to my Tennessee dynasty. That's like 12 years in the future now of entirely made up players. Or if you're curious about other titles, the beauty of the Amazon Fire TV is you don't have to buy the games. You can try out things like Call of Duty Black Ops 6 and Avowed just as easily as you stream your favorite show. It is gaming made simple, and it is all on your Fire TV. Or if you're just trying to make streaming a little bit easier, there are more than 1.5 million movies and TV episodes from your favorite services like Netflix, Prime Video, Disney Plus, Hulu, Max, and so many more. And if you already have a console, a Fire TV Stick 4K device is more affordable and easier to travel with, allowing you to take your games wherever you go. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K 2nd Gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max 1st and 2nd Gen, and Fire TV Cube 3rd Gen. Thank you to everyone that is hanging out on this bonus Leon Draisaitl should win the Hart Trophy edition of Locked On Oilers. And it's not enough to have the narrative. I think, frankly, you can make a case for several players who weren't finalists. I think you can make a strong argument for someone in that Miro Heiskanen cut. I know Heiskanen missed a lot of games this year, and the Stars have been able to offset those. Nathan McKinnon is always an MVP caliber player. Mitch Marner's defense was tremendous this year. He really took another step in that direction. If you wanted to nominate Sasha Barkov, I wouldn't have a problem with that either. And that's the beauty of these types of conversations. And frankly, what upsets me about them, because so many people get caught up in who gets nominated, and we don't spend enough time talking about the why. Because most of the time, if you lead the league in one of the major statistical categories and you're on a playoff team, you're going to be in consideration for this. And you saw Hellebuyck lead the league in wins and shutouts and goals against average and goals saved above expected, which are all real benchmarks. You know, it's a season of the caliber of what Ilya Sorokin did 2 years ago, what Igor Shesterkin did 3 years ago, what Carey Price did in 2017. These are incredible seasons, and it feels a little messed up to have to talk derisively about Kucherov, who led the league in points, and Hellebuyck, who's going to win his second straight Vezina, which is going to put him in rarefied air as a 3-time Vezina winner. But as for Leon, as for the stats, to record 52 goals in as few games he played, remember, he only played 71 regular season games this year, and he recorded 52 goals. Just on raw output alone, that is kind of crazy. Then you break it down a little more macro. 240 shots on goal, converts 21.7% of them. That is a career high. 106 points in 71 regular season games. So we're talking about 1.25 points per game. And the real argument for me on a statistical basis for why Leon deserves this, and even more so than in years past where he's been great. So when Connor and Leon are together, we know they are out there to try and create offense at all costs. And the underlying numbers in the regular season were tremendous. 66% of the scoring chances, 64% of the shots, 63% of the goals, 67% of the expected goals, 63% of the high danger on 11% shooting with 889 save percentage. Now, Leon without Connor is 54% scoring chances, 57 shots for, 55% goals for, 52% expected goals, 57 high danger, 7% shooting. So without Connor, definitely a bit less output on all fronts. So without Connor, definitely a little bit less offense. And then where it gets interesting, and I do think some of this is just a reflection of Zach Hyman and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins not having great shooting years, but without Leon, Connor's goal share is under 50%. In non-Leon Draisaitl, Connor McDavid minutes together this year, the Oilers lost Connor McDavid's minutes, which is an absurd thing to say. And I do think it's fair to say that some of that is a byproduct of Mattias Ekholm being injured and when he was playing being ineffective. I think some of it is just a matter of the Oilers overall Their shooting not being as effective this year. You know, I mentioned Hyman and Nugent-Hopkins in particular because those were guys McDavid spent the majority of the regular season playing with. But when you think about that in the abstract, the fact that the Oilers lost Connor McDavid's minutes, and I know we're talking about by decimal points here, 49.2. We're talking about 0.08 goal share being the difference between being even and losing. But we are at the point now where you can make an argument that Leon and Connor drive so much offense off of each other that Leon is on equal footing. And that's not me saying he is as good of a player as Connor. Connor is the best player in the world. You can fight me, Nathan McKinnon. I don't care. Connor McDavid is the best hockey player in the world. And when you add someone like Leon, who is at worst the 6th or 7th most talented hockey player in the world, and you allow those guys to play together, the symbiosis, the flow state you are able to enable, it is second to none. There is not another team in the sport that can match that in raw firepower in terms of forwards. The Avalanche used to with Rantanen. I know Rantanen has had a bit of a rough go with the Stars, and he's gotten going as of late in that series against the Avs, but Nate Mack and Rantanen were really the only two forward permutation. You know, Eichel and Mark Stone. Stone's defense is definitely still really effective, and he's always been a clutch goal scorer. He's got a great track record in Vegas as being a clutch player, but it's not on the same tier. You know, McDavid and Draisaitl are two of the 4 or 5 best players in the world on the same team. In a good year for Austin Matthews, you could maybe make an argument for him and Mitch Marner both being top 10, and that would get them in the conversation with Connor and Leon, but that is the best 2 forward pairing any team in the league can offer. And the trickle-down effect that has. You think about, we talked about it the other day, and I still have it actually on the dry erase board. I haven't used it since then, but real quick, this play, the jam, the walk it out, the play I love talking about the other day that worked, that got Corey Perry a power play goal in game 4, that only works because Connor and Leon are on opposite sides. So all of these defensemen are preoccupied with the 2 best players in the world. And that's going to open up space for your Zach Hymans and Corey Perrys, for your Nugent-Hopkins, for your Bushbombs. All of that is interconnected. And Leon has shown, to me, this year, an ability to elevate his game to an even higher plane where I don't think it's crazy if you want to make the argument he's a top 3 or 4 player in the world. You know, he has been superb in the playoffs so far. And look, I know this isn't like the stock market. We don't have a live ticker following the stock value of each of these players game to game, day to day. Though that's a great idea. I should look into seeing how I could go about doing that. But right now, as we're sitting here, I would make an argument Leon has been the best player in the postseason. And I would make an argument Leon was the best player in the regular season. And coming up next in our final segment of today's edition of Locked On Oilers, I'm going to tell you why Nikita Kucherov and Connor Hellebuyck's arguments aren't as good as everyone thinks they are. Coming up next. The Stanley Cup playoffs are here, and if you have never been to an NHL playoff game in person before, it's unlike anything else. The intensity, the speed, the energy, it's all next level. I've been very lucky in my life to go to some really remarkable playoff games. Marty St. Louis' overtime game winner in 2014 in the conference finals. Panarin's Game 7 OT winner against the Penguins in 2022. Last year, going to the Barclay Goodrow game in the conference finals against Florida. I've been really lucky in my life, and it's time for you to make experiences like that. And thanks to our friends over at Game Time, getting in the door is easier and more affordable than ever. Game Time is the fastest way to grab playoff tickets, even for the biggest matchups. Prices drop as puck drop gets closer, and with last minute deals, you can save up to 60%. Their all-in pricing shows you the total cost up front, so there are no surprise fees at checkout. My personal favorite reason that I use Game Time is the panoramic seat view. So you know exactly the view of the game you're getting before you buy your tickets. And with Game Time coverage, I know I'm protected, whether it's cancellation protection, job loss assurance, or their 24-hour return guarantee. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that is code LOCKEDON NHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out on this bonus Leon Draisaitl should win the Hart Trophy edition of Locked On Oilers. And we were talking about narratives and why narratives are an important part of building your case because of who votes, journalists, writers, media people. They're suckers for a good narrative. And you think about some of the more interesting debates. You think about Embiid and Jokic 2 years ago. You think about Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson this past season, the last 2 years, frankly. And ultimately, people vote more with their feelings than with statistics. And this is me making that case because, number one, talking about Connor Hellebuyck, the Winnipeg Jets won the President's Trophy this year. They were the best team in the entire NHL in the regular season. And Connor Hellebuyck is the best player on the best team. That's a very easy narrative. We see that happen quite often where a player who's on a really good regular season team goes on to ultimately capture the most valuable player because they are an instrumental force in driving that regular season success. Hellebuyck led the league, like I said earlier, and I'll repeat again. He led the league in wins, goals against average, shutouts, and goals saved above expected. This, frankly, is probably the best argument a goalie's going to have to win the Hart Trophy because as the best player on the best regular season team, he was a instrumental component to their success. And as you've seen in their first round series against the Blues, which is playing over my right shoulder, which is why I'm occasionally glancing over at the TV. The Blues are winning right now, but we'll see how the rest of that game goes. But with that in mind, and you got to remember, the playoffs are not part of this. The voting happens before the playoffs start. So those are not in consideration, even though maybe you can make an argument based on Hellebuyck's disqualifying play so far, where he's been maybe the second worst goalie in the playoffs so far behind Stuart Skinner, who got benched. And the Jets are still persevering, which, you know, they're a good team. They're going to be able to overcome some deficiencies with in-house, but that Jets team is going to go as far as Connor Hellebuyck can take them. I like a lot of the guys on that team. I am a diehard Nick Zararis guy. I love Dylan Sandberg. I have been a Cole Perfetti guy. I really like a lot of I am maybe the biggest non-Jet fan that's a Josh Morrissey guy. I love what Josh Morrissey brings at both ends of the ice. But that team goes as far as Connor Hellebuyck can take them. And if he does not turn it around, I struggle to see a world where they're going to be able to beat the Avalanche or the Stars. And then as far as Nikita Kucherov, once again, won the Art Ross Trophy, most points in the regular season. He has won a Hart Trophy before, similar to the way Leon has. This is already an all-time great player. I have no qualms about saying Kucherov is one of the 5 or 6 best players of the last 10 years. I think, frankly, since 2017 or so, he's been in the argument for best winger in the league. He has consistently been a driving force for one of the best teams. Frankly, I would say the best team of the last 10 years. And I got into an argument with somebody about this the other day after the Panthers eliminated the Lightning in 5 games. And I said, man, it feels like the Lightning dynasty is probably over. And the person, she replied, we're calling the Lightning a dynasty. And I took a minute because I could tell she was being genuine and wasn't trying to be, just argumentative. And I thought about how I would make that case. So number one, the Lightning have won the most regular season games in the last 10 years. They have won the most playoff games in the last 10 years. They have won the most playoff games in the last 10 years by 28. The next closest team to the Lightning in playoff wins is 28 games behind. They won 2 Stanley Cups. They have been to 4 total because you count 2015 when they lost to the Blackhawks, and then 2022 when they lost to the Avalanche in 6 games. They have 4, no doubt about it, first ballot Hockey Hall of Famers in Kucherov, Hedman, Vasilevsky, and Steven Stamkos. You could maybe make an argument based on how the rest of Braden Point's career goes. Maybe he's in that conversation. And look, this is not me crapping on the Lightning supporting cast. They were great this year. I picked the Lightning to beat the Panthers in my bracket on Locked On NHL Thursday with Hunter. I thought the Lightning were going to win this series because I felt better about their supporting cast. I wasn't sure the shape Matthew Tkachuk was going to be in coming back for the Panthers. And when you think about Hellebuyck and you think about Kucherov, those teams have enough where they would not be entirely in dire straits without them. The Jets would be a wild card team if they had league average goaltending. You know, if you dropped Darcy Kemper in there, if you dropped an average goalie in there, the Jets are probably a fringe playoff team by virtue of their good team defense and the forward depth they have. The Lightning probably wouldn't be as good, but I think you can make a case they'd still be better than Montreal. They're probably still better than Ottawa, and that's enough to get you in the playoffs. So in terms of the supporting cast, in terms of the importance to the team, I think you saw what the Oilers looked like for the backstretch of April where Leon wasn't playing. And with nobody to take the heat off of McDavid, this team doesn't work. It's more nuanced than that. You know, they were missing Ekholm, they were missing Wallman, Zach Hyman missed some games. But we have to be frank here. The Oilers are two guys and then everyone else. And Bouch is somewhere in the middle. I know my Evan Bouchard takes occasionally get some crazy reactions. Like I called him the third best or third most important player on the team a few weeks ago. And someone commented on the video, Bouchard, third best player on the team, question mark, as if that were a crazy opinion to have. Evan Bouchard is the Oilers' third best player. If you want to make an argument for a healthy Ekholm, I'd entertain it, but the value of an offensive defenseman, because of the value that position typically brings, it makes offensive defensemen so much more valuable. But based on the narrative, based on the stats, based on the other players up for this award, I will not be expecting Leon to win this. It feels like it's going to go to one of Kucherov or Hellebuyck, but I think Draisaitl has made a case. I think Draisaitl just had one of the best seasons we will ever see from an NHL player this year. And I know that might sound a bit hyperbolic, but he's up for the Hart Trophy. He scored 52 goals only playing 71 games. This is a truly remarkable hockey player that we are all very lucky to be watching play on a consistent basis. That will do it for today's bonus episode of Locked On Oilers, breaking down why Leon Draisaitl should win the Hart Trophy. I will talk to you guys on Monday with Chris from Locked On Golden Knights to begin our second round series content. I will talk to you guys then. Everyone have a safe and fun weekend. Oh, wait, what am I talking about? Thank you so much for making Locked On Oilers your first listen of the day. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts or over on YouTube. And if you're itching for more hockey content, be sure to check out the Locked On NHL feed, where game night goes live right after the final game of the night. And then the Locked On NHL show right after in the mornings to get up to speed on everything you missed from the night before and get the table set for the next night. I will talk to you guys on Monday. Everyone have a safe and fun weekend. Until then, let's go Oilers.